Welcome and hello and welcome and hello and welcome and hello, guys. It is Poco Moss, the show where we give you just a little bit more, even on the holidays, sometimes on the weekends, often at just sort of incoherent, random times when we just kind of have nothing else to do, of a short attention span theater type of situation. I'm not a robot. I am portly, but that's not the same thing. Um, in any case, guys, I wanted to come on and just do a little bit of a show today, a little bit of an update, a little bit of Danny 101, because I don't want you to get Munson out in the middle of nowhere after, there's so much fear out there. A lot of it, centering on the, tariff threats around, invading Greenland or buying Greenland or whatever this is. And then this kind of escalates into, you know, all these European nations, now lining up, they're going to raise the tariffs, is escalating. So it's another trade war. I view it as another pretext for a trade war. I know, Trump's a huge fan of using leverage. They're calling it blackmail. His cabinet is calling it leverage, but whatever you want to call it, it's basically a threat. Like, you do what I want, or I'm going to, basically put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. And then, the EU for their part is basically like, no, we're not playing along this time. We have actually more leverage than you do because, many people don't realize this, but, the EU now holds more United States debt than anybody, not only treasuries, securities, or bond, everything. Many years ago, people like when I grew up and sort of cut my teeth as an investor in the 80s. Yeah, I'm old as shit, guys. I might not look it, but I'm old man river. I'm just old as fuck. But in any case, guys, no, I'm not that old, but Europe has a lot more leverage, I think, economically than people think. Not necessarily in a trade war, but that's not how things play out. I mean, if they start to weaponize not just trade, but actual finance, actual policy, actually what they're willing to buy, if they're willing to actually hit us and stop financing our debt, it's going to be very problematic. But again, this is like exactly what I saw happening with the America First deal back in like last April, whenever everybody thought the world was going to fall apart. These tariffs are going to be forever. There's not going to be any more trade. And my sentiment then was the same as it is now, which is that these things will blow over. We are going to continue trading with Europe. We're going to continue trading with Asia. We're going to continue trading with China. We're going to continue trading with Latin America. Unfortunately, from the US perspective, what we're seeing is kind of, how fast the world adapts and goes around, even a very powerful country, even the most powerful country, like the United States. You see, yesterday or last week, Canada signing a deal with China, which they were calling like canola for cars, where, Canada opens up their market to Chinese EVs, and China starts basically buying their canola oil and soybeans and stuff again. Um, and then you see, the Europeans signing a free trade deal with a bunch of nations in Latin America. So I don't know, the way these systems work. They're just, the markets are living, breathing organisms that find efficiencies, find solutions, solve problems. So if one particular nation, in this case recently, the United States, is throwing up a lot of, roadblocks, a lot of threats, a lot of tariffs. Um, Nobody wants to stop doing business with the United States. Obviously, we're the biggest consumers in the world. We produce some very, very important things. We export, a lot of software, a lot of service, a lot of tight mom jeans. If you've seen The Prophet. What's up, Eddie Martin? But I just wanted to go over sort of my take on this, what it's all going to mean. I think it's all going to sort of blow over. I don't actually think we're going to fight a war with Denmark and Europe. I think essentially the security thing and, wanting ownership is like you want to exploit the mineral and, natural resources of Greenland. But I think there's other ways to do that without, blowing up NATO. I know, and people always say, "Oh, you're anti-Trump. You're out in California." I'm really not like a TDS guy. I actually probably agree with Trump more on his policy instincts, how the United States, has been getting sort of, I think ripped off is the wrong word because we're doing it consciously. I mean, we're making a decision to kind of, finance the world's security needs, this world order that's existed, post WW2, and the American taxpayer has been on the hook for a lot of that. And I think that's Trump thinks, we're getting a bad deal, a dishonest deal, and like other NATO members and, UN members should actually pay their dues and, pay the part. And it's difficult, it's kind of a difficult equation in some instances because you're thinking, okay, these poor developed nations really can't afford to pay a lot of this stuff, can't afford to pay, their IMF loans back or whatever, much less the UN dues. But I think Trump's targets are more sort of these rich European nations that have been gold bricking off of us, for a long, long time. I know that's sort of an angry, simplistic way of putting it. Now, I try to not be an angry, simplistic person, but I think he has a point with a lot of this stuff. And I agree, it's like I agree with the policy, sort of instinct, but I just don't agree with the method. I think the method is extreme. It's like I think we should have a secure border. I think we're coming, we should know who's coming across. We should make sure terrorists and drugs and all these other things aren't just flowing freely. But then you go from there and saying, okay, we're going to go after the worst of the worst. We're going to go after gang members and drug dealers and violent felons and stuff, which I'm 100%, behind that type of policy. And then you find, you get this militarization and just going after everybody. And you have, you can like racial profile and all this stuff and just, it's like a papers, please. And so I think of a lot of the reporting as being, a little bit true dramatic. It's like if you don't agree with the policy in terms of like this whole border patrol thing, um, you really have to get out there and vote. That's how we should be resolving policy differences. It's not necessarily like I'm completely for everybody's right to like protest and free speech and all that stuff, but you know, this is the policy that, people voted for. And if you don't agree with it, a lot of the people that tend to protest, I don't think a lot of these younger people actually vote, and statistics bear that out, you know, that younger people vote at, kind of really suboptimal rates. So if you're angry about government policy, your best remedy is to vote and advocate for positions and, work within the system. It's not, to tear the system down. But again, I try not to make this a political show, but it's just like I think all the fear that the whole system's going to collapse and the whole world order is going to collapse is overblown. I think, Trump understands that our real adversaries are China, Russia, some of these other rogue nations like North Korea. I think, he kind of goes by this keep your friends close and your enemies closer, philosophy. I think I just when people think, oh, Trump's an idiot, and I think that's not true. I think he's very clever in his own way, and I think he has, he uses some blunt methods to get what he wants, but his motivation is get from A to B, and he's writing his letters to like this is just weird. This like letter to the prime minister of Norway or whatever, where he sort of goes into the fact that he's going to take over Greenland because they didn't give him the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know if that's true. It sounds like something that years ago I would have read in the Onion or something, but I don't know. We're living in a different world. And in a sense, though, the world was so asleep. We were sort of so used to the status quo, going along to getting along, and just accepting everything as it was, rolling down this path of inevitability. That somebody like a Trump comes in and really shakes up the foundations of how we've been doing things. It's going to make a lot of people extremely uncomfortable. Some of it's made me extremely uncomfortable, but some of it I've also said like, yeah, that really needed to be shaken up. And again, I can agree with somebody's sentiments. I can agree with somebody's worldview and disagree completely, with certain methods. It's like I'm just trying to not see like the world as like an us versus them and like hate political opponents, because I've always considered myself more like center right, at least especially economically, a little bit more on the libertarian side, socially more on the libertarian side, always, very, pro gay rights, very, I guess liberal in that sense on the I don't know. I guess I'm kind of I don't know how to define myself in these terms, but I just feel like, the politics has become so poisoned and so fucked up. You got, militarization of the streets, and it's like, I don't know. I've been to so many red states and so many blue states, and at the end of the day, we're all Americans. And people want to be here, and I want to be here. I just think people like give up so easily. They're like, "Oh, he's going to blow." He's not going to the world is going to go on, you know. So are the markets, so are stocks. But sorry guys, long rant there. But it's just, this stuff gets exhausting after a while. It's like, do we really need another trade war over the security of Greenland? I mean, and then, yeah, I read another story where he's still, wanting to make Canada a state. It's like, let's we have to some we all want certain things. I mean, in a, our ideal like Willy Wonka world, but you have to play within the real world that, Canada's going to be an independent nation, that we really don't want to be at war with Europe and, blow up NATO. I know a lot of people, in Trump's administration really probably do want to blow up NATO. I think that's a horrible idea. I mean, making other nations pay their fair share, I think that's a good idea. But I think in this world, where you could have war with Taiwan, you already have war in Ukraine, your allies are more important than ever. The countries that I identify with the people are like small d democracies, Australians, Japanese, South Koreans, Western Europe, fighting with us, the Polish, the Danish, all of our traditional allies. I know some of them with the sort of, MAGA mindset is like these are liberals, these are, they have to deal with the immigration, they're being overrun. You get a lot of this rhetoric that's just extreme. And I know like, yeah, Europe definitely has problems to deal with in terms of immigrant populations and the welfare state. And, you know, there's some of the countries are running deficits now, and they're not keeping up on defense spending to the, commitments they made in terms of NATO, United States, percentage of GDP. There's just so many um, geopolitical forces, economic forces, pulling on the markets and then pulling on different sectors. But anyway, I could blabber on about this stuff forever, but it's complete incoherent ramble. So this is just one article was reading Barron's Wall Street Journal. I think these are two pretty reasonable sources. You get some fairly decent news, but European stocks fell, gold and silver surged. Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on 8 NATO nations, while the White House pushes to acquire Greenland. Just odd. You're just sort of like, hey, you sell us this land or we're going to put tariffs on you. I that tends to go from, like, to me, in my view, this method of negotiating is not helpful. I think we can get access not only to, closer security relationship in Greenland, but also access to more, minerals, natural resources, rare earth. Those deals are there to be made. And I think there's compromise there. And I think that's eventually what you get to. And Trump will get there. And he generally does get there. That's why people like, oh, he chickens out the taco thing. He's not chickening out. He's getting what he wants in a way that he's used to, because the world that he's from is very cutthroat. Real estate development, New York City. He came up when his father was, and his father was building out their wealth when he was younger. They were not in these, Manhattan properties. They were in, much more poor, like working class buildings in different boroughs. So it was more after the fact, when, Trump was his own guy and his father was gone, that they moved into sort of these glitz and gold projects. But the family wealth was built upon, these low income units. A lot of people sort of don't get his biography and where this mindset comes from, that, everything's a knife fight, because it is, That's how things worked back then. Then there was like a lot of like racial profiling, redlining stuff that his father, his dad was, so everybody said, oh, his dad's this, his dad's that. And I'm for no, I don't advocate for any type of racism at any point, but I'm saying the world you live in is the world you live in. And some businesses are dirty and some, and so your worldview is formed. A lot of that is based upon, your experiences. Your moral center is not just sort of something, maybe you're born with it. I don't know. I don't know how these things work. Anyway, guys, I do apologize about this extreme ramble. But stuff like it's not worrying me in terms of my investments. I mean, I'm not worried about Microsoft or SoFi. This Canada deal with China, they say is very good for Tesla, so that's good for me. I'm not worried about really any of it financially. I'm sort of worried about the future of the world, the future of the country, how we're going to sort of bridge the gap that's become, I think, a little bit crazy in terms of like the policy divisions used to be around where you'd want the top marginal income rate, the top marginal income tax rate. Would it be 35 or 33 or 28 or, you know, it wasn't, we're going to send the army to your city. It's a different world. It's a scary world, but I think they use these fears a lot of times to crash stocks and get you out. And then, lo and behold, stocks are back at all-time highs. And they keep doing that because, this AI trade, it's not a trade. It's a fundamental, paradigm shift, like the same way the internet was. This could be even bigger. This could be even much more transformative, and it's going to generate, I think, a lot more wealth. And that's why you're starting to see kind of the, FANG stocks or Magnificent Seven or Magnificent Five or Fabulous Four or, 2 and 4 makes a door if you like to play backgammon. Or Tovley, as my grandma would say. Anyway, forgot what I was talking about. She loved to play Scrabble more than anything. My grandma would get out that Scrabble dictionary and just, spot check me. It's like, that's not a word. I assure you that's a word. I know a lot of stuff for a young fat kid. It's like, you're right. That is a word. Did you challenge that? Did you formally challenge that? Or are you just, utilizing the Scrabble dictionary like it's your own personal, scratch paper? You playing God Scrabble, Grandma? She was a stickler for the rules. She'd also whack you across the head with a big ring she had on. Just smack me right in the head when I said something stupid. Just whack you. It really hurt. She had a big bear paw on her. I don't really know what that has to do with anything. What's up, Katie Wentworth? The great Katie Wentworth has joined us. No, you know what, guys? I'm building more muscle, and so I'm starting to look a little better. My face is looking thinner, but I'm not losing any damn weight because I'm so fat. I got these. God blessed me with some short, fat legs. I'll tell you. If my thighs were normal in proportion to the rest of my body, I got my torso, I should be like 6'4", but my legs, I should be like 5'6", my short, fat thighs. And so it balances out. I'm like 6 feet tall, but I'm put on backwards. I'm put on wrong. Know what I mean? Know what I mean? I'm a big douche. It's very unfortunate. Yeah, Tortuga de Rio. Welcome and hello, and welcome. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, but I've lost a little bit, but I'm putting on a lot more muscle, and I'm walking to work. Some days I'm doing, about 6 miles of walking, which, when you're 330 pounds, that's a lot. It was like Joe Rogan. He was talking to some fat guy. I don't know who it was. It was one of the comedians. I don't know if it was like this guy who lost weight, but he's like, let me see your calves. I think it was Stavros. If you guys know Stavros, he's a comedian, like a bald dude. He's cut crazy hair. He's hilarious. But anyway, he was talking about hey, you're 300 some pounds, you're rucking all the time. He's like, what's rucking? Because none of us, of course, are in the fitness and psychotic industry like Joe Rogan, just wanting to kick a guy in the leg until I don't know. Joe Rogan's kind of crazy. I thought he was pretty funny, pretty decent stand up, but I don't know. I'm not much on podcasts. Listening to some guy ramble on, for 3 or 4 hours. If you want that, you can just go to Poco Moss reruns, absolutely free. But I don't have a giant head like Joe Rogan or Not a Lurker. Giant, beautiful, bald head. I don't know if Not a Lurker can compete with Joe in the sort of the general size of his head. Skull looks like, doing tons and tons of steroids or something. I know, yeah, he's one of those giant like HGH heads. Looks like he's wearing a Steve Tasker bubble helmet at all times. I love SMCI, Brian, with a Y. Let me take a quick bathroom break because I've been just slamming these waters here. Give me about 30. Don't give me 30 seconds. Give me like a full minute because I have to go wash my hands with soap and water afterward, and then we'll go over this thing. This is actually, this Lisa Cook case, I would argue, is a lot more important than what's going on with Greenland in terms of the future of the markets in the United States and all this stuff in general. But I'll be right back with you guys. Sorry, I just have an old aging bladder and it's not all it's cracked up to be. I'll be right back. 2 and 2, to quote the great Chuck Woolery. Sorry, guys. I wanted to put on them. No, there's no music. There's no nothing, and you're not paying. Nobody here is paying because I don't charge anything. So yeah, there's nobody. If anybody says here there's paying, you can't tip me. You can't join my after hours. You can get on my OnlyFans, but you got to find me. Got to comb the chubby chaser boards. It's not easy. So there's a small subsection of people with a fetish for poorly aging middle-aged gentlemen with short, fat legs, picking bad penny stocks, telling bad jokes. It's a very niche. It's a very niche market. My OnlyFans is not doing well. Anyway, guys, welcome and hello. Let me look at a couple of comments before we go over this, guys. Thanks for joining me, by the way. It is Poco Moss, the show where we do give you just a little bit more. I'd like to thank, of course, the greatest moderator in the business, Not a Lurker, J Money. Guy's got a beautiful head and an even more beautiful heart. And, we're just huge non-lurker fans here doing Poco Moss. Also, Alberto Berti Avalas, we do not know what happened to him, but he is residing in parts unknown. He is on walkabout with Crocodile Dundee, and if he ever gets back, he will resume his wrench duties here. But and also his nephew, he's our third moderator. I'm convinced that guy doesn't even exist. Come on, Steve. I put myself on. I put my removed thing, but yeah, you would have heard a toilet flushing, and you would have also heard me washing my hands, and you would have seen me dry my hands with this paper towel, which I still rocked out with because I was in a hurry because I wanted to get back to you turds. But anyway, so let's talk about this, this case, and then people are like wondering what to buy. Let's take a break from this actually, and let's look at SMCI because listen, the whole knock here is that their margins are deteriorating. They went from 15 down to 9.3, and they're supposed to lose another 300 basis points down to like 9.0 this quarter. But let me ask you, would you rather have 9.3% of 5 billion or 9% of 10 billion? And I know that's a fairly oversimplified view, but it's also a true view. I mean, you have this company that just a few years ago, they were selling just a couple of $1 billion a year. And now they might have a $10 to $11 billion quarter, thinking optimistically. Could be wishful thinking. But a critical development, I think, with Supermicro that just really didn't get any traction. And yes, they got a bounce out of it, but they're bouncing from the toilet. I mean, you're talking dead cat bounce. I mean, this thing is down. This market cap is low. You would think this company was in huge distress, burning cash, buried in debt. This valuation just doesn't make a lot of sense. But to me, Supermicro's up 8.2% after new AI retail deals. We know we talked a lot about the credit line, but I think the one that got overlooked a little bit here was this retail stuff they're going after. Because if you look at the knock, the margins, they're getting more and bigger, huge projects, and those projects obviously are going to have a lot of pressure on pricing. That's going to be sort of your major differentiator. I know they're also, looking at speed of deployment, ease of maintenance, density, energy use, all these things. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is the bottom line. The buck stops here. If the buck don't stop here, it don't stop nowhere. So anyway, I think people are really this deal that they're doing to move into retail stores, retail settings, automate processes, reduce employee headcounts, reduce leakage, reduce theft. And also it's a way for, brick and mortar stores to modernize, get into this century, utilize AI, and it can compete. It can allow them to compete and win versus, you know, the online crew, because you make it into an experience. You're not just going into the store, you're having this AI powered, experience, and it's virtual reality, and it's all these things. It's laser tag, you're running around, you're wearing LA gear, Velcro high tops. It's the late 80s. So they secured the $2 billion revolving credit facility with JP Morgan. We know that AI infrastructure offerings have been growing scrutiny of its margins. That's what you hear the knock on this company over and over and over again. So they're not going to be able to grow the margins. The margins won't recover. But I think this retail deal, goes away just toward answering those questions, because, you're going to be able to push more margin into product like this. Is a lot of glitz. It's individual setups. It's kiosks. It's partnerships. It's smaller scale on a per unit basis. Now, if you can land some big retailers, you got a lot of stores. You're going to get a lot of sales. I'm not saying this is going to be a big deal, but it could be. And nobody's even, nobody's treating it like this is sort of a groundbreaking, set of companies they're putting together, a set of partners. It could be, could fizzle, could be nothing, but to own Supermicro today, you need to believe that its role as an AI infrastructure supplier can offset pressure on profitability. We sort of know that, recent announcements, but we want to talk about this. Supermicro's narrative projects 48.2 billion revenue and 2.4 billion earnings by 2028. This requires 29.9% yearly revenue growth and 1.4 billion earnings increase from 1.0 billion today. 33 members. Why don't they talk about this? They don't really get into it. Sorry, I thought they got into more like the partnerships. So this kind of mentions it, but it's collaborations with Everseen, Kinetic Vision, NVIDIA to deliver AI-powered edge-based intelligent retail solutions, improving in-store operations and supply chain management. I read a couple better articles on this last week, so I wish I pulled up one of those, but the bottom line for me here is if they can hit their sales numbers, the stock is going to probably move up in the short term. I would say at least into the mid 40s. If they're able to hit if they hit 11 billion, I think that's almost a sure thing. 10 billion, I think the market is sort of pricing that in. So that extra billion in sales could be quite critical. And that's actually, would be another 10% on top of the sales. So it's a big difference, 10 billion, 11 billion, but I would be satisfied with 10. I would love 11. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on where earnings are going, but I'm looking for stocks that are just sort of mispriced, for lack of a better term, that the valuation is wrong, that the market is getting it wrong, and that this is a stock that I think is worth, $60 today. They're pricing it at 30. That's what I look for. I'm an idiot. I look at Google, I look at these relative valuations, and I say, look, I'm not going to buy Google after this big run. I'm going to take profits there. I'm going to put those profits back into Microsoft that just, retraced a lot, because I think they're both long-term winners. I see these two long-term winners. I say, what's the more attractive valuation? One stock just ran, one stock just pulled back. I buy the pullback. That might be, a logical fallacy. It might be because I'm working with, a man boob philosophy. It might be sort of a tiny weighing energy. I'm not sure. There's all kinds of explanations, but um, this is another interesting article, broadening playbook on sort of the FANG trade. Where's the other? There was a good chart I saw. Can't remember. Yeah, so the Magnificent Seven drove markets. Now they're pulling in different directions. It's talking about the AI trade, the group stocks coming apart. Most trail the overall market. Um, I think it was only Google that beat the S&P 520. No, also Nvidia. So that's no surprise. But sorry about it. I got some kids going crazy, screaming outside of my office. I don't know what they're doing. So anyway, it's kind of distracting, but my attention span's that of a gnat. Anyway, only Alphabet and Nvidia outperformed the S&P 500 in 2025, and so far this year, 5 Magnificent Seven stocks are faring worse than the broader benchmarks. Money managers, which also include Microsoft, Meta, Apple, Amazon, Tesla, no longer still on the stock market. Sorry, the correlation has fallen apart. Chief Investment Officer at Benson Group. I don't even know who that is. What they have in common is being trillion-dollar companies. It's a sign the AI trade has evolved since a raging bull market, with traders now placing their bets more selectively than before. Some expect the benefits of artificial intelligence will spread to industries like healthcare. Others are doubling down on chip makers, energy companies, and they expect to build out. Sorry, got to get some water. You're starting to see it broaden out, said Michael Hartnett of Bank of America, a strategist who's credited with coining the term Magnificent Seven back in 2023. Hard to believe that term was just 2023. The name comes from the classic Western movie featuring 7 heroic gunfighters and their push to save a small town. The next Magnificent Seven will be the mega cap companies who can show that AI adoption is transforming their huge businesses. Don't forget that in the film, only a few survive. That's true. Individual investors, many of whom are loyal Magnificent Seven shareholders, have also started turning their attention to other parts of the market. These retail investors accounted for a significantly smaller proportion of overall trading volume than those 7 stocks last year than they did in 2023 or 2024, according to Vanda Research. Tesla, a longtime favorite of ordinary investors, seen the biggest decline in retail activity. Average daily retail turnover dropped 43% in 2025 in the peak investor interest 2 years before. Tesla still had, I think, a pretty good year last year. Hartnett said he initially grouped stocks together based on their shared characteristics. Huge, well-run companies are dominant in the tech sector, but AI arms race has been driving a wedge between members of the Magnificent Seven for some time. Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Meta are now the hyperscalers, spending hundreds of billions to train new AI models, build data centers, expand cloud compute capacity. Nvidia still dominates the market for chips, need power the most advanced AI tools. Meanwhile, others are lagging behind. Apple shares trailed the S&P 500 index last year. Well, the iPhone maker faced criticism for spending less and losing ground to its competitors, and they just made a deal, obviously, with Google to deploy a version of Gemini as the AI deal on their iPhones. So Tesla stock, once a market high flyer, has vastly underperformed several of its Magnificent Seven peers. Sales of electric vehicles have slowed. They're all at different stages. The rising tide has lifted all boats. Now they're going to get the winners and losers. And that's kind of what we've been saying is you have to be very selective. You have to watch your entry points. Any of these stocks can make you money. It's just where you buy them and where you sell them, how much discipline you have, whether you're willing to, buy through dips, whether you're willing to, buy through offerings, these different things, whether you stay the course, work your plan, whether you trade. I prefer to stay invested. I prefer to try to, if I'm going to rotate some money from Google to Microsoft, fine. If I rotated some money, last year, I'll rotated a lot of money from Tesla to SoFi. A very good move for me, So that those SoFi shares like 3-4x since then. You always have to be rotating. You always have to be thinking about sectors. People are worried. People want safety. People are always going to need healthcare. People are always going to need utilities. People are always going to need drugs, pharmaceuticals. People are always going to need banking services. That's one of the reasons I like SoFi, lending services. People are always going to need insurance. People are always going to need, these various sectors that are maybe they sort of got overlooked there in all the, Magnificent Seven AI trade frenzy the last few years. But now people are going back to diversification. Now people are going, sort of back to the traditional stuff and saying, how do I, avoid downside risk? How do I, protect my gains? This sort of thing. So what's going on? 4 cool air units, indeed. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Sorry. Yeah, let's see, Jeff Presley. I loved how the good big bank earnings helped SoFi last week. Yeah, I mean, the banks were doing very, very well. It bodes really well for SoFi's earnings. But I always say with SoFi, they manipulate the starting line pre-earnings depending on what they wanted to do. Obviously, they wanted to sell it off after earnings, and so they let it go quite high before earnings. And other times when they've kind of done a pump and dump after earnings, they bring it in low. This time it could be a pump that doesn't dump. This If earnings are good enough, I think SoFi jumps back up over 30. I think it could even be over 30 pre-ER. I know people think that's impossible. This stock can move an awful lot in a week. If with SoFi, I see, another great ER. I see S&P 500 inclusion coming sooner or later. The guy who I really like, this guy on YouTube, this Motley Fool guy, Matt Frankel, his prediction was that SoFi hits $50 sometimes this year. I mean, his stock of the year for this year was PayPal, which I like PayPal. And a lot of people are kind of surprised at that because it's not some, big home run trade. But I'm a valuation investor. The stock is undervalued. They're buying back shares. They make money. You know, the multiples are very, very attractive and they're not shrinking. I mean, I think the management is going to, succeed in some of their modernization efforts. So I'm still holding a very significant PayPal position. I buy the stock at these levels. What else would I buy? All kinds of things. I'm a big Tevis investor also. You guys know that the Tevis 3000 2.0. You've seen this.
Let's really drill down on this.
Let's do it, Tevis. So you guys, obviously, we know we can't afford Tevis and his teams. All that stuff's very, very expensive. You have to pay for mustache wax. You got to pay for, flying all of his different girlfriends from far-flung corners of the world. Got to pay for a Zorro cape. I don't know. I just think Tevis looked like a young Elvis. I think he was kind of morphing into Rosie O'Donnell for a while there. Last time he looked just like Coach Ditka. He had the big thing in the back. I expected him to be snapping his gum. I don't know. He's all over the place. But we're huge Tevis fans here at Poco Moss. But he likes NBIS. I like CoreWeave. I like QXO. I like PayPal. I actually like General Motors right now. I think it's undervalued. I think they're, got a good, profitability turnaround story underway. United Healthcare, ExxonMobil, Texas Instruments is, some of these boring names. I still like Costco. I still like Home Depot. I still like Lowe's. I think Target is a decent buy at these levels if you want to go to safety. There's nothing wrong with just something like JEPQ if you want to, get some enhanced dividends. That's kind of one of the more safe, well-run operations. I mean, that's been paying, 12% with appreciation. So that's been very, very attractive. Some of these opportunities that are much safer. I mean, I see a lot of safety in stocks like SoFi. Obviously, SMCI, opposite of safety. I'm a buyer of NVIDIA. I'm a buyer of CRISPR. Huge, huge opportunity right now. I think Microsoft might be my stock of the year. I think the stock's just down too low, and I think it's underestimating how much money they're going to make from it. I think if there's any huge winner in AI on the B2B side, I think it's going to be Microsoft. I think they always position themselves to make money. They're growing rapidly. I know that you pay a premium for Microsoft, but I've just always been a fan of the management, the company. All three of their major business sectors are growing rapidly. I mean, I love Google too. I just don't like to buy after these big runs. I think I'd love to see Google pull back into the twos, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. Might be wishful thinking. I mean, I have a good sized Google position, a much larger Microsoft position. Buying that stock much longer. But anyway, yeah, it's like Frank Costanza's lawyer. I saw your lawyer. He was wearing a cape. Yeah, I agree with you. The valuation, but Brian, you have to realize if some big news, some big red flag, even from this valuation, they're going to cut the stock in half. They'll cut the valuation down to like 1/4 sales. They don't care, man. They don't care what it's worth. They don't care about reality. They just care about bludgeoning retail investors to death at the bottom. They want you to sell the dip and smell the rip. They want to hotbox you in an epic fart under a comforter, like, you're their like they're your big brother or something. Um, so anyway, they're all at different stages, might be heading different directions. Each Mag 7 still has an outsized influence on the market. Together, they comprise roughly 36% of the S&P 500 market cap. Wall Street hasn't left behind a winding trail of has left behind a winding trail of nicknames and acronyms that have long since gone out of style. There were the Nifty 50. This is important. That's not to mention BAT, China's Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, FANG, Managed 7 President, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Then they added Microsoft, and they added, this AI, then Tesla. It's not a suitable replacement yet, but I think there probably will be. So everybody's looking for the next big thing. They want to take profits out of these stocks. But if you look at this chart, very interesting chart here. This is kind of what I was talking about. Obviously, this is the last just 6 months or so. Alphabet is up, 80%. And then Tesla is up almost 30. Tesla's up 37%. Apple up 21. Then you have Amazon only 5.9, Nvidia 5.9, and then Microsoft and Meta are down here just under. This doesn't make a lot. I'm a buyer of Meta. I'm a buyer of Microsoft. Would I buy Alphabet? I would like to buy Alphabet more sort of 275. I think you're going to get that pullback. I don't know though. Alphabet has an awful lot going for it. I mean, people really like Gemini. They think they're going to be able to monetize that, but I think their path to monetization on AI is less clear than Microsoft, just because I think Microsoft is so embedded in the business world, institutions, NGOs, universities. It's everywhere. I think Apple's overvalued here. I can't buy Tesla here until I see, I hold so much of these, I hold so much Tesla already, but I just can't buy the stock here. I was buying it, 150 not that long ago. Hold my position and see what I still believe in their AI, their robotics. I believe in the company. I believe in Elon Musk. I think the guy is a revolutionary. I don't again, it's kind of like a Trump thing. I don't agree with every method. I don't agree with every statement. I don't agree with every sentiment, but I'm not just I'm not a flamethrower. I'm not gonna just, hey, dump it all. You're gonna all these people are like, oh, I bought this Tesla before Elon went insane. They have the bumper sticker on. It's like, dude, that's a brand new Model Y. Thing's only been out for a few. Just, you want a Tesla. It's a cool car. It doesn't mean you endorse everything Elon Musk says. I don't know. I hate people, but this is an extremely good chart if you want to look at why I've been saying. I didn't even really look at this exactly, but why I've been looking at why I've talked about. I'm not a buyer of Alphabet here. I'm not a buyer of Tesla here. I'm really not liked Apple for quite some time, which has been to my detriment. But I've been a buyer of Nvidia. I've been a buyer of Amazon to a lesser extent, but Microsoft and Meta, two very strong buys. So. And they talk about, why that is. What else did I have here? I completely forgot. Oh yeah, the Cook case. This is another important one. Everything for the most part looks expensive. Yeah, I mean, that's true, but look at the growth rates of some of these companies. Look at Microsoft's growth rate. It might really surprise you. Might not. Yeah, so I mean, if you look at like a summary. Sorry, I keep bumping my hat into the microphone. Any Big Mountain Fudge Cake fans out there? I'm also a huge fan of the Dale Gribble Bluegrass Experience featuring Connie Supanusen phone on the fiddle. Let's see. Yeah, just Microsoft, just incidentally, look at that annual growth from 200 billion, 210, 245, and then 280. I mean, it's very, very strong. The profitability, 70s, 27 billion, 28 billion bottom line on 77. I know Google's numbers look very, very good too. But I don't think you're paying a huge premium for Microsoft here. I think it's a really good buy, but yeah, I think Microsoft, this is just my opinion, guys. It's not it's nothing scientific. It's just my gut feeling, and my gut is a considerable force of nature. But I think Microsoft could gain like 35-40% this year. I think Microsoft makes the kind of move this year that Google made last year. I think it's going to turn into the darling. They're going to flip the narrative. There's no short on the stock. Institutions own, the whole damn stock. I don't know. I'm curious. I haven't even looked, but yeah. So, I mean, 76% held by institutions. I mean, who are your top guys? Vanguard, BlackRock, JP Morgan, State Street, FMR, Geo, T. Rowe Price, Morgan Stanley, all the usual suspects. Any company where Vanguard and BlackRock are one and two, sign me up because they make money. And I know they own the whole market. So that's kind of, their Vanguard's number one, BlackRock's number two in trade. So some of that is like they're just positioned there because they own the whole basket. Got a big basket on them. Huge basket of stocks. They're all titers. Made all titers. Neo's been really doing well. I mean, they just said that they're going to release the what is it, the ES9 in April, officially launch it at the auto show in April, and that's going to be that super SUV like the ET9. They were saying, the fighter jet of executive saloons. Paraphrase Jeremy Clarkson. Why would you want a saloon? You guys like the original Top Gear. Wasn't a big Jeremy Clarkson fan, but I like James May. Captain Slow. I'm a big Captain Slow fan. Richard was okay. He's kind of short, but he's all right. Oh, yeah, I'm a strong buy Neo here, under $5. It's very risky. Supermicro, I know what you're saying. Like, there's no downside. Neo, how can they go down from here given their sales, impending profitability, incredible lineup, battery swap, William Lee's winning smile? Trust me, it can go down. Anything can go down. They can slam this thing right in the toilet anytime they want. What else were we going to talk about? Europe is looking to reduce U.S.-based tech, the Greenland thing. Yeah, isolating ourselves, getting all these trade agreements made around us, pushing, we're pushing a lot of our friends. How does it benefit us to push the Canadians closer to the Chinese? I mean, we're going to push everybody closer to the Chinese. And I mean, yeah, they want the, wealth of Greenland, I guess, if we're going to provide the security for it. But there's something to be said for the art of diplomacy, for subtleness. I mean, Denmark has been fighting with us in every one of these wars in the Middle East. They're always there. They send real troops, the real combat. They're an ally. Like, they've always been an ally. It's just crazy. Like, we're thinking about invading Mexico, I'm not saying you work in law enforcement partnerships, I know we have boots on the ground in these places. I'm not against that. I live in the real world. It's a dangerous world. And, the United States is the big cop on the block. I get that. Got to swing a big stick, But it's more in this dangerous, uncertain world where our allies are more important than any. But do we really want to give up access to British intelligence? Do we really want, our friends in Asia not sharing intelligence with us because they don't trust us to not invade, an allied country? I don't know. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. Like I said, I agree with a lot of the sentiment. It's just the methods, I think, are just, a little bit unhinged at times. We don't want to crash, but, who's profiting from all this volatility? I don't know. Who knows these announcements are coming? I don't know. Somebody, that's for sure. I mean, then you find out the guys like there's like a billionaire guy who's like I think he's a governor. Like, they have business interests in Greenland. So, I don't know. It's kind of how the world works. So money makes everything go around. Yeah, no, it's fucking insane. Like, I don't think we're actually gonna go to war with Denmark. I just think this is part of the process that the administration uses to get what they want, but it's a bad way to negotiate. Game theory relies on the relationship going on and multiple, repetitions to get to your desired outcome. Doesn't work if like imagine a game where you're like, okay, we're in a football game and we're going to do everything we can to win. And one of the players just like pulls out a gun and like shoots another player. Like, oh, we got the ball, fumble. Like, you can't shoot another guy. It's like, well, where's that in the rule book? It's like there are conventions that things work. Otherwise, you don't have a game. Nobody's going to play you again if you shoot the other quarterback. You go, we won, we won. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get why we want to go to war with Europe and Mexico and all this stuff. You know, Venezuela didn't produce any fentanyl. I don't know. I'm trying to see it. Trying to see why we're pushing all of our traditional allies and trying to turn them into enemies. How does that really benefit us? I don't know. I don't think it does. I think it's madness. But yeah. Anyway, what do I know? Nobody elected me to anything. Yeah, it is a skit from Team America. It's something. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense on any level. Economically, militarily, our security position. I mean, we already have military based in Greenland. It's just the mineral wealth and rare earth and stuff. They don't want that to go to those native like 50,000 people or whatever. That to go to like some corporations or people with, ties to the administration or whatever. I don't know. It's just so out of left field. You think, oh, these things you're throwing out, like we're gonna, nothing's off the table. We're gonna invade. A lot of things are critical to US national security. It doesn't mean you can just take the land, but I guess it does. I hope not. I hope we don't get there. I know there was a bipartisan congressional delegation in Denmark, and they're like, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say this is sort of the end of NATO, end of New World Order, if, invading a NATO ally. And I know probably the administration doesn't really consider Greenland part of Denmark. I know they were saying, oh, it's just some pieces of paper. You landed a boat there hundreds of years ago. We probably had boats there too. It's like, well, our country didn't exist, but I don't know. The market doesn't need another war. My big, fat, overtaxed heart doesn't need another war. But then I will make the point, like, Trump has not had a history of starting wars. I mean, he has a history of hyperbolic rhetoric. He has a history of using extreme leverage to, cajoling, coercion, blackmail, beating you about the head, breast, face, neck, and chest with a wet noodle until you give in and give him your Nobel Peace Prize or whatever. Poor lady had to give him the medal and what. It's wacky. It's wacky stuff. Yeah, I mean, it would end NATO, but NATO, like, okay, alliances are what they are. This is a formalized, treaty organization. I think it's madness to go anywhere near that. You have others doing like, do we really want to lose like Poland? Do we really want to lose Scandinavia, all these countries that border Russia? Who's going to trust us? Like, the Koreans already, we destroyed our relationship with the Koreans with that immigration raid at Hyundai. Koreans hate us now. I don't know if people get that. I don't know if people understood that Koreans loved us and now they fucking hate us in Korea. Ask somebody if you know people in Korea. Like, they're not getting over that. There are people being shackled and chained, the technical experts that we wanted to come over there and set up these factories that were, they were going home anyway. They weren't staying here. They weren't overstaying their visas. They're setting up machinery, come in and shackle them, like treat them like there's some kind of, it's fucking nuts. Pushing your allies away into the hands of your enemies, pushing everyone, making everyone more dependent on China. getting free trade agreements that exclude us, threatening to invade Canada and Mexico, threatening to invade Europe. Where are we, folks? I don't know. This isn't supposed to be a political show, but I have a feeling it will all come to nothing. It won't come to nothing. I think the United States will get concessions. Is exactly what we want, but I think it'll all be done peacefully. I think eventually we'll get to a negotiating table. It's just, do we need this violent upheaval before real negotiation? I mean, I don't even think Denmark was more the native populations. They don't even want Denmark there. They want independence, but they'd much rather be associated with the EU or Denmark, the United States. They don't want. Not everybody wants to be American. I don't know. You know, I'm American. I've always been American. Not everybody has to be American. Not everybody has to love us. Not everybody should have to bow down and kowtow to us just because we have the most powerful military. This is not a healthy way to sort of, run the world if that's your desire. And that shouldn't be your desire because you can't control everything. The more you try to control everything, you know, the tighter the more pressure builds, the more artificial. You have to let things happen. You have to, there's going to be natural cleavages, partnerships, but philosophically, I mean, we have a lot more in common with liberal democracies than we do with, Chinese thought police, totalitarian police states, re-education. Disagreement in this country used to be legal. You know, you didn't have anybody in like prior administrations like, Bill Clinton or Barack Obama try to shut down all the religious universities and, you know, just crazy under the because the universities are anti-Semitism. It's weird. It's weird stuff going on. I mean, I don't believe in anti-Semitism. I think Jewish students should be protected, all that stuff. But we're being presented with all these false choices. It's like either we enforce immigration law with the military or just, rapists and murderers. Right? You can enforce the law. There's methods, there's techniques, there's levels of heat. You know, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't have any answers. Just a fat guy with a lot of questions. Kina Demetros was wondering how the EV imports from China and Canada will be allocated. 50,000 a year. 50,000 a year is not a lot, but remember Canada, I don't know. That's a lot for Canada. I mean, I don't know how many, what do they sell up in Canada? 1 million vehicles a year, a couple million? Probably a fairly decent chunk, but yeah, I don't know the details of that deal. So Kina, I couldn't tell you exactly. Sorry, buddy. Ryan and Sartell, I thought with SoFi's latest offering at 2750. That's never how it works, Ryan. I mentioned that it always drops way below that offering price. That's where you buy. It came only down to 25. It usually acts as kind of a magnet briefly, and then it goes back up way above that, which I think is exactly what's going to happen. But they've been stepping on SoFi like crazy. Remember, short interest back up around 10%. That's a flashbang waiting to happen. I mean, S&P 500 inclusion is going to come. It's going to come and it's going to send the stock up. SoFi is not overvalued. SoFi is not at all over. Find me a stock growing like this. Like I said, I made a video about this. If you change the CAGR assumptions from like 17, 18 to 30, you get a company that's worth 60 to 80% more because of the compounding nature of numbers. Now, if it goes to 25, you get a company that's probably worth 35, 40 bucks today. If you assume CAGR going out 5 years is going to be 25, I think it could be 30 or more. I really do. I think SoFi has tons of stuff up their sleeve. I think they're going to make an acquisition in the crypto space. I think they're going to be big on crypto, but in a conservative, sensible way. I'll take SoFi savers over Robinhood traders any day of the week. I mean, I hope you took profits in everything, but I think, SoFi is as sure a thing to become a huge company as I've ever seen in my life. The business model, it's an avalanche rolling downhill. Let's see, what am I doing here? Sorry, guys. Let me. Okay, sorry about that, guys. What the hell was I talking about? What about the massive USO that's rearing ahead in the thaw? That's conspiracy theory. Otherwise, US wants Greenland. Now get this, 300 miles. So the alien is under there. Maybe it's the mothership. Maybe it's Sigourney Weaver. I don't know. I hadn't heard that honestly, Billy Jack. I just kind of came on to ramble. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Know what I mean? Know what I mean? So what else we buying, guys? SoFi, CRISPR, SMCI, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, Nebius, CoreWeave, QXO, APLD, Costco, Home Depot, Lowe's, Texas Instruments. I don't know. I don't know what the hell we're buying. You guys like Broadcom? Think that was enough of a pullback? AVGO. I like Broadcom. Took a little bit of a position. It's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of, you know, entry points. Like this was quite a spike, but you see it kind of basing here. You see the sales going way up. It's still a big multiple. I mean, it's still a big multiple. Does the growth justify that for you? Looks really good on an annualized basis, but I don't know. I think this one's still pretty rich. Really good pop. You know, obviously when you're taking almost 10 billion to the bottom line versus 18 billion in sales, those are like Nvidia like margins, god like margins, which is obviously why they're getting this incredible, 1.67 trillion dollar valuation. But they're on a pace to do about 40 billion in profit. But that's I would buy Microsoft more than I would buy Broadcom for 2026. I just this move, I think you see retracement, I think you see retracement back to at least this little shoulder around 300. I don't think the retracement's done. I think they're rearranging some deck chairs. Wells Fargo raised the price. Wells Fargo does shifty calls too, but I don't know. That's a doozy. Indiana wins championship, 20 points or more. I'm buying SMCI, Neo, SoFi. Can't agree with that. KOPN, Meta. I really like Meta, Jarrett. I really like Meta as well as Microsoft off of that last chart. I mean, I think Meta is figuring out how to monetize AI, but they're reducing, the metaverse spend, getting back to sort of their core, ad business, cash flow, doing things. You can't just invest an unlimited amount in AI without a coherent plan. Not everybody wants to be a cartoon. Yeah, I got a ton of tabs open. That's only one of my browsers too. I got like 20 browsers open and I got hundreds and hundreds of tabs open. But I just got a new computer. So this thing's a beast. I loaded it up. It's like a 32-inch Omni Studio HP all in one. Loaded this bad Oscar up with the tons of memory, processor, blah blah blah. Who else is here, guys? Great Payush is here. Oleg, what's going on, Oleg? Yeah, I would love in one of these new ET9s, believe me. Greenland has a lot of Danes. They got a lot of Danes up there. I heard it was like 58,000 native peoples in Greenland, but I looked like the city looked like a lot more people than that. I don't know that much about Greenland. If that's not you know painfully obvious. But Miami Hurricanes versus Indiana Hoosiers tonight. Who do you like, Payush? Let's see. You got the Patriots, Denver, Seahawks, LA Rams. Let's see. MALA went up. Where there are no roads in Greenland, it's a wasteland. Yeah, it's basically a big expanse of frozen tundra, as far as I understand. There's just a couple of small, outposts, and the U.S. has a big military base there, Space Force. But it's just basically a big. I don't understand the notion that, like, okay, if we're not doing anything, China and Russia are going to come just take over the land. I mean, this is Greenland is protected by NATO. Like, if we're gonna, we to protect it, we have to own it. It's like, well, if you want to finance that protection, I kind of catch your sentiment. It's like this massive land, it's costing us a lot in terms of like these eggs. I don't know how you like if you sort of average everything out, all of our security obligations all over the world. This like we have this inordinate expense of keeping the sort of bad guys out of Greenland, and nobody's really asking us to do that. I think a lot of like when I read like there's this one congressman that's a physicist and he's talking about like the golden dome and like why it's not going to work on that scale, why it's not possible, why our adversaries already have countermeasures that would defeat, gold like Russia. They have missiles that can go around missile defense. I mean, they're not giving those to like the Iranians and stuff, but I think Russia is very advanced in terms of this tech. I think China, they're moving past as like ICBMs into things like, drone swarms, asymmetrical warfare, you know, hacking, electronics. They got their chips in all of our utilities. They can shut us down anytime they want. You think that Israeli pager attack was bold? They've embedded kill switches into all of our fucking utilities and infrastructure. Basically sold our soul to the Chinese for cheap caffeine-free green tea. Mandels. I am a huge fan of Mandels. Anyway, no idea what the hell I'm talking about. Blabbering on like a crazy person. Hour and 6 minutes. Jesus. Big a mountain fudge cake. You guys big John Redcorn fans. I know I am. Dale, it is good to see you too. Go, John Redcorn, got a headache. I miss me some King of the Hill. Good point, not a lurker. Thank you. I love PayPal. I think PayPal is, this is what I look, just when people say they're done for, it's a dead stock. You can't, once the turnaround happens and is obvious, you're not going to get a bargain on it anymore. I think there's a reason they're buying back their own stock. PayPal's not sexy. It's not exciting. PayPal's like, when I was a kid, that's what you were paying with, for God's sake. It's been a while. I mean, not when I was a kid, but when I was like in my 40s, 50s, early 50s. I'm 79 years old. What's up, SRM contracting? Yeah, it is all about RMI. ROI. Yeah, it is. It's and that's like how Trump thinks, and like people have to understand that. They have to say like, really, is it fair for the U.S. taxpayer to pay this amount for the entire world's order and security, holding back the bad guys? I don't. It was our choice to sort of take that leadership role, but it kind of filled a void. It was going to be somebody. We all would be speaking, Russian or German or Mandarin or Cantonese or something. Maybe I wouldn't be so fat though. Rid of all this fast food. We're exporting fatness to the rest of the world. I'm starting to see some fat Asians around Los Angeles. Probably second, third generations. Like, welcome to the party, pal. Oh man, I love chunky Asians. I love all Asians. I love all people. But it's not about like a, little like baby with chubby cheeks smiling. I have a love for all things chunky. I identify as chunky. Let's see. We're getting a lot of oil money from Venezuela now. I don't know. I don't know how much. I don't think Venezuela. I think they need massive investment in their oil, in their infrastructure to pump that much oil. But I'm sure, yeah, we're probably producing some. But I don't think it's massive. I mean, these tariffs, like, yeah, you're getting money from tariffs, and they're talking about we're going to give each person $2,000. But again, they're talking about if we impose 25%, tariffs on France and Britain and all this stuff, it's going to reduce their GDP by like 0.03. They have more leverage than we do. If they stay together, the whole world's going to pass us by. And be like the, crazy old man on the bus bench. And like, it's like, okay, if your instinct might be right, but your implementation and your methods might be too extreme where nobody trusts you to play, game theory. Nobody wants to play a game with you over and over again if you took out a gun and shot the quarterback. Hey, we win. Yeah, but it's football. You're not allowed to shoot the quarterback. It doesn't matter. The referees agree with us. Any of the referees that don't agree with us, we fire those referees. But you're going to get indicted. That's murder. No, we're not. Like, I don't know. Everything's like too extreme. Everything's just too extreme. I wish you'd just take the temperature down a little bit. I think the Europeans have a lot of, they see more history. They see more the bigger picture. It's a big world. It's a dangerous world. It moves fast. We need our friends. We need friends. We can't go this thing alone. Talking about not wanting to pay for the world. What happens when we lose NATO? What happens when nobody trusts us? It's very bad. Very, very bad, in my opinion. You don't have to agree with somebody 100% for them to be an ally. So, oh, they're too liberal. Who are you going to trust if you're not going to trust our traditional allies to help keep us safe in the world, to share intelligence, to trade, to finance our debt? It's just knowing who your friends are and who your enemies are is really important. And if you start to conflate friends and enemies and you don't clearly delineate the two, I think you make yourself much more vulnerable to these existential threats that exist out there. But yeah, the oil companies, they don't want to spend the money. Now he's saying they're going to guarantee that the taxpayers pay them back those costs, all these things. But then you get into like these are not free markets. So many like the United States taking an interest in like Google or I mean in Intel, and then they want 10% of the revenues of chips sold to China. Like I thought thought conservatives believed in free markets, not intervention, all this stuff. I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah, but I don't think any of the oil because you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, think about how long it's going to take for them to rebuild, manufacturing capacity in Venezuela. There might be, another American administration. It's going to take 5 to 10 years to get that, booming. It's not like Iraq is like paying us back in drove. We spent like $1 trillion in Iraq or whatever. We're not going to make that money back. That's not how wars work. You don't win the war to get paid back. You win the war because you have no choice. But again, I have hope. I have hope. There's a method to the madness. I don't think Trump's crazy. He hasn't started wars. I think he wants to negotiate from a position of strength, but you can negotiate from a position of strength without coming off as like, you want to blow up the entire relationship. I just don't think that's healthy because then nobody's going to want to negotiate with you in good faith ever. They're always going to be suspicious of you. They're never going to take you at your word. They're always going to wonder when is the other shoe going to drop. So I don't know. It's so hard because I didn't, I'm like, I don't know, like, how do you vote for Kamala? She's doing like the SNL. It's like, is there a better solution? I just wish things weren't so extreme. It's like, man, if people sort of lowered the temperature, we could figure out solutions. I mean, like I said, a lot of this stuff is a distraction. If you think about Greenland, I think it's more of a distraction than this very important case going before the Supreme Court that's going to determine if the Fed is independent or not. So if you can remove Lisa Cook for alleged mortgage fraud and the lower courts have blocked the move, asking the Supreme Court to allow the firing to proceed. The administration is, even as Cook's legal challenge at the core, is whether the president can fire a sitting Fed governor, something that hasn't occurred in the Fed's 113-year history. Guys, it's an extraordinary thing that the United States has survived and evolved as a democracy based on the founding documents that were written back in the 1700s. Countries don't last this long in the modern world. It's not like the Russian Empire. So most countries are, even European countries, their governments are relatively young. Asian countries, even younger. I mean, think about the current Chinese government's only been there since the 50s. I mean, our governments survive with continuity, peaceful transfers of power, big asterisks there, but peaceful transfers of power, for 250, close to 250, 200 some years. It's extraordinary, this experiment. So many people have sacrificed so much, and I want to see it continue. Not necessarily for my sake. I'm a big fat old geezer. But for the children, Yeah. Maybe nothing is really like, it's all about where you are relative to where you start. I mean, you want to get from A to B, sometimes the quickest route is just hit the other guy over the head with a baseball bat and steal his lunch money while he's unconscious. When he wakes up and comes to, he's probably not going to be too happy with you. I don't want to run foreign policy by bullying, by just blunt force bullying. It's not a viable long-term strategy. Because you're going to get what you want in the immediate term, but people are going to figure out how to work around you and sideline you and not rely on you anymore. It's bad. Yeah, I can't wait for SoFi earnings either. But like I said, I think the fear of Trump's going to do this, Trump's going to go to war with all, I think it's all overblown. I don't think the guy wants to start wars. I don't think his base wants him to start wars. I don't think that's going to bring America first. I don't think that's going to bring more manufacturing. I mean, the idea of these higher tariffs, everybody's going to build factories here. I mean, some of that's worked with auto. You are getting certain more commitments from Koreans, even Chinese are thinking about, should we set up factories in the US? But are those profits, returned back to their home countries? What are the wages like? Do you want, minimum wage factories? You want high-tech factories, the kind of things that the, Hyundai was building before you put all their technical experts in shackles and humiliated them. Treated them like they're on the Green Mile or something. Coffee, like the drink, just not spelled the same. Oh, not a lurker. A great not a lurker. For a guy who doesn't want to start wars, he survived. Yeah, no, he's a flamethrower, and he's a lot of rhetoric. And yes, he's gone, fired at Iran, and he fired at Venezuela. But you notice he didn't. He pulls back, and it's not chickening out. He's not. It's none of that. It's calculated. It's how he is. He goes far, and then he pulls back, because if you go completely nuclear at first, the what you actually wanted in the first place is going to seem much more palatable to whoever you're quote unquote negotiating with. I'm going to shoot you in the head. Please don't do that. It's all right, well, just give me $20. Here's $20. Don't shoot me. But next time they're maybe he just wanted $20 in the first place. Maybe he didn't want to actually kill me. He just wanted the $20, and I gave it to him. Maybe I'm a big sucker. But if you believe even 1% that he's actually going to shoot you, you're going to give him the $20. So I got $20. He folds it up, puts it in his pocket, puts his gun in his other pocket, tucks his gun into his crotch. Where's the next shakedown? But the thing is that's scary for me is I tend to agree with a lot of, like I said, a lot of his sentiments on, geopolitics and how our debt and stuff that we're running to keep this new world order afloat is unsustainable. And the people that are benefiting the most from these, like Europeans who've lived in like this peace and freedom without having to spend on their own security. Does that right? Does it make sense? But I mean, if we pay the money to carry that big stick and then people have to listen to what we say. The theory was that, you don't have to use the big stick necessarily. Speak softly and carry a big stick. That's Oleg's motto. Guy just has to calm down a little. Still much better president. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I don't know what Kamala would have been like. I found her frightening. I didn't find her to be like, didn't seem like a serious person. She's doing that Maya Rudolph thing. Kamala, blah blah blah. Like, how do you pronounce it? Like Kamala. Like who the fuck cares? Stop it. It's not cute. Nobody wants cute. Nobody wants to laugh it up, yuck it up. Everybody's fucking terrified. They want serious, sober, not saying that's necessarily what Trump offers, but I think that's what people saw. It's a strong, people want a strong man. When you're scared, you want a strong man. And let's face it, we're a bunch of terrified Karens nonstop. Okay, well, this was a long, boring, pointless turd of a show. But I got to say, my stock of the year is not going to be PayPal. My stock of the year might just be SMCI. And I'm not declaring that definitively, but I think SMCI is just grossly undervalued. I think it's a pure AI play. I think that the AI, I think the AI trend is not a trade. I think it's a fundamental change in how things are going to work going forward. I think it's a brave new world, and I think AI is here to stay. It's going to grow. It's going to pervade everything we do. It's going to be in cars. It's going to be in appliances. It's going to be in, it's going to be a huge part of running our daily lives. And I think it's going to be even a bigger shift than, the internet eventually. I think it's going to, like I said, create a lot more wealth. And I don't think the demand, even build out of data centers, is going to slow down for the next 5 years or more. Yeah, we're probably going to get to a point where you don't need these super expensive chips and where they figure out a way to do these things cost effectively, like they were talking about that Chinese model. Whatever happened to that? Supposed to put NVIDIA out of business. Supposed to put all these things out of business, because they could do it all cheap with less. But it might all been smoke and mirrors. Might all been lies. I think we don't know yet. And everybody's saying Alibaba has incredible AI, incredible algorithms. So the China trade, a lot of people think is back on. Certainly not the case with the EVs like NIO. It's been a bit of a kneecapping. Should have sold today. Should have sold today. Disagree. I think NIO could, potentially be a $15 stock this year. I know that sounds crazy, but if it looks like the trajectory is all heading in the right direction, why not? Look at the valuation some of these EV companies get. Look at where Lucid was trading. Look at where Rivian was trading. Look at where a company like Hyliion was trading. A lot of these companies, they don't even really exist anymore. Company like, a NIO, like a Li Auto, they're really pushing in the, AI space. So you got like XPeng pushing into flying cars, pushing into robots, NIO pushing into, chips, all these different things. If you're talking about valuations that are very China negative, I guess you could say. BABA is nothing that more selling that shares will be at last week lows. Okay. Could be. BABA and Baidu, my top AI plays. Interesting. We'll see in 9 days. Yeah, I can't stop Trump from pushing markets lower. We'll see. I honestly think markets, it's going to be very choppy, lots of volatility, but earnings, I think markets might be up this week. I think this all might cool down a little bit. I think Congress is kind of starting to step in. I don't really think they want to go there. Why would we want to go to war, with NATO in Greenland? It's just when we already have access to Greenland for security purposes. And I think obviously now with the, a level of fear and uncertainty that's been created, I think, we can negotiate something far more extensive, which I think was the whole point from the beginning. So don't fear too much. I think everything's going to be fine. I don't think we're going to be at war with Denmark. I don't think we're going to be at war with NATO. I don't think NATO is going to end. I think, some of hopefully there are some cooler heads in Congress on the conservative side that really see that it's just weakening our alliances so much. It plays right into the hands of Russia, China, all these people that, we say we're trying to thwart. If we're trying to thwart them physically from taking over Greenland, we should also be trying to, hamper their alliances, hamper their relationships, throw sand in their eye. Yeah, the government shut this budget stuff is crazy, but it's like so is the debt. You know, you can't. The problem is the problem with the Doge thing was that the government does not waste the money. It's not all fraud and abuse. Outside of this like payday loan stuff, all the COVID stuff, there was tons of abuse there. But Medicare is relatively efficient. Yeah, there of course there's fraud, of course there's welfare fraud, food stamps, everything else. But people want a social safety net. People love Medicare. People want all this stuff, but it's just not feasible because people don't want to pay more taxes. You keep wanting to give the people with the most money huge tax cuts and then increase spending. Like, what do you think's going to happen? You're just blowing up deficits nonstop. Doesn't really seem like anybody is serious about, actually paying down the debt, even just reducing the rate of increase. These numbers are so big now, these debts and deficits we run, they're just almost not real. They don't feel real. Um, won't go to war, guys. The public comments from the EU are different from closed door conversations with the. Yeah, you're very right. I mean, I think it's a lot of posturing. I think it's a lot of dick measuring. But at the end of the day, I think real, sober people know who our friends are, know who our enemies are, and where to draw that line. We do not face an existential threat from Europe and Denmark and Britain and France and Germany. Quite to the contrary. We do face, I would say, I don't know if we face existential threat from Russia, but certainly we do from China. I think China plays a long game, but I think China wants to, dominate the world eventually. Read Les Nazarov. He knows all about those super weapons, post-nuclear super weapons. I love reading these like crazy. um, yep, I always buy the fear. Always buy the fear. The sushi man is here. What's up, Devin? We're all gonna have some sushi with Devin. Um, Sushi chef. That is so cool. One of the coolest jobs. Oh, I wish I had any talent or concentration. I would probably do something. Anyway, guys, it's been an hour and a half. It's been absolutely ridiculous. I was thinking we could see a war if Trump better stop being a buller or someone will test it. Yeah, I mean, who's going to want to fight a war with the United States, though? I mean, because look who he's going after. I mean, he doesn't go hard at China. He doesn't go hard at Russia. And he'd like anyone who would potentially have armed. Russia can't really have an armed conflict with anyone outside of, nuclear. Their military is a hollow fake deal. I mean, they can't even conquer Ukraine. Couldn't even come close. I mean, it's a complete farce. They have to get, they're firing Iranian drones. That's the bulk of their arsenal is these Iranian drones. They have a lot of advanced weaponry, but they can't build much of it, and it doesn't work right. So I don't know. Speaker of the House is in London today to speak to our parliament. I hope he can chill things down. Yeah, I hope so. And I think, like, let's be serious. People to people, America is not enemies with Europe. It's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. We're constructing this thing ourselves. There's a way. I understand they're not happy with Europe and the relationship there and the security relationship, the money, the immigration. I get that. But just from a pure point of being self interested, these alliances help keep us safe. Think about it. What are we going to form alliance with, our enemies? It doesn't make sense to me. Russia is very hollow and weak. Yeah, Germany sent troops to Greenland. Again, we're not going to fight a hot war. We're not going to start shooting at the Germans and the French, but we could definitely go land our people there, create a big, crisis, and everybody has to go to the brink and then step back from the brink. Anyway, guys, I got to run. I'm absolutely exhausted. I just keep talking and talking and talking, but it should be I don't think this week's going to be all that bad. I think the markets are actually going to be up. I think earnings were good. I think the banks look good. I think tech's going to look good. Yeah, the Magnificent 7, some of it's slowing, but I think like Microsoft is going to turn in huge earnings. I think Nvidia is going to hit another monster home run. Basically, it's the same as it's been. It's only getting better. And you have to learn to ignore the fear. You have to learn to ignore the uncertainty, learn to ignore the chop. Stocks go up and down. They go up and down violently. But at the end of the day, I think, companies are getting more efficient. They're getting more technology. They're getting more breakthroughs. And there's just these forces at play that these companies are getting better and they're worth these higher multiples. And where else are you going to put your money? So I think the market's just fine. I think the world's going to be absolutely fine. And, tomorrow's another day. Let's see how it goes, guys. Thanks, Scott. Thanks a lot for watching. I watched Greenland come back and pledge to buy U.S. weapons. Everything cools down. Up we go or chop we go. That's a fact. Yep. Okay, the futures look bad. What we did Trump say this week? Yeah, the futures look bad right now. But again, sometimes it's a big head fake. Sometimes, you come back right in Tuesday or Wednesday, say something completely different, send the market skyward again. And maybe if you happen to knew that was going to happen, your friends and relatives could make money off of the insider information. So again, I think politicians are the only people who are allowed to trade off of insider information. But I know they're trying to do this big like politician corrupt trading push with bipartisan support, but I don't think it's really taken off. I don't think Nancy Pelosi's in favor of that at all. She's like the most successful congressional trader of all time, but she's worth a couple $100 million anyway. I think her husband was that dude who got hit with the hammer. I wonder if he's okay. I hope so. And whatever your politics, guys, you don't want to see a lunatic attack anybody with a hammer. Believe me. I've been hit with a hammer by myself on my finger all the time. And it sucks. TIGR. No, I haven't looked at TIGR, but no, I got it, guys. Hour 32. I will look at it, but for right now, I got to run. Really appreciate it, guys.